Hello and welcome to our 10th session of Connecting Ports, the platform where our focus is on the critical issues shaping the global port industry. It's fantastic to have you all with us today again. I'm Christina Prieser, Associate Partner and Transport Economist at HPC, Hamburg Port Consulting, and I'm excited to guide today's discussion on a topic that has the power to redefine how we operate, innovate and collaborate across the port sector. As always, our motto is debating what matters, and we also want to hear from you. So please share your thoughts, ask questions, or even challenge what you hear today. We'll bring as many of your ideas into the discussion as we can. Today's focus is something central to every port and terminal's journey towards sustainability and resilience, the circular economy. What does it mean for our industry? How can it drive innovation and collaboration across industries? And how do we balance its principles with the realities of our traditional business models? These are just some of the questions we tackle as we explore the opportunities and challenges of making ports more circular. To help us navigate this important conversation, we are joined by an exceptional panel of experts, each bringing a unique perspective from their corner of the industry. So let me introduce them to you. First, let us warmly welcome Caroline Craenhals, CEO at Belgian Scrap Terminal in Antwerp. Caroline leads one of the most innovative players in urban mining and modern recycling. Today, she will highlight how scrap terminals like hers are driving innovation in resource recovery and shaping the circular economy. Next, it's an honor to introduce Professor Dr. Elvira Haezendonck, full professor at Vrije Universiteit Brussel and visiting professor at the University of Antwerp and Erasmus University of Rotterdam. With a wealth of expertise in transport and sustainability, Elvira will provide research-driven insights into how the circular economy is being applied practically within the port sector. Then, please join me in welcoming Piotr Konopka, Group Vice President of Global Decarbonisation and Energy Programs at DP World. With a career focused on global energy transformation, Piotr will explore DP World's experiences in turning circular economy principles into impactful initiatives across its networks of terminals worldwide. And last but not least, we have James Hallworth, Commercial Manager for Circular and Renewable Industry in the Port of Amsterdam. He will share his hands-on experience driving the development of circular economy initiatives within one of Europe's most innovative port areas. Thanks to all of our speakers for being here today. With such diverse perspective, we are set to explore how the circular economy is reshaping the port sector from every angle. So, James, let's begin with you. At the Port of Amsterdam, you have been at the forefront of integrating circular economy principles. Can you tell us about the situation that prompted the recognition of its importance and how it became part of your port strategy?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. It's an interesting story because it all began as a result of the credit crunch in 2008. Of course, we had the banking crisis in 2008, and that led to a real slowdown in investment in the port area. So what we saw was that our traditional customers, the large multinationals, were slowing down with their investments, and so we realized we need to bring some, not just new investment into the port area, but also some new blood and a new energy into the Amsterdam port area. So what we did after visiting various initiatives actually around the world, we decided we're going to start an innovation hub in the port. So in 2014, we started with the development of something called ProDoc. And ProDoc was a physical location, which brought together startups and scale-ups. So that's the idea of some new blood in the port area. And so what we did is we brought lots of different young companies together to explore what kind of innovation can impact our ports in this period of low investment and not very much happening. And what happened was that we realized that one of the main growth markets was circular economy. So we were being approached by lots of companies active in circular economy activities. And we brought several of those into Prodoc, and we saw that they grew, and we saw that this market was really starting to take off. So that was really the moment we realized, okay, there's something happening here. And it's more than just recycling, because the Port of Amsterdam was always very strong, and still is, obviously, in the recycling branch. We receive a lot of waste flows coming out of the city and out of the region. But this was something different. This was we realized there's a lot of innovation, there's a new market developing, and that's where it all sort of started for us. And after a few years, we realized that we need to have more people working on this. So we opened a department which is dedicated to circular economy and bio-based activities.
Thanks a lot, James, for this insightful start. And it's fascinating to hear how the circular economy became such a pivotal part in the Port of Amsterdam strategy. So now let's turn to Caroline. Your family business, Belgian Scrap Terminal, has been a pioneer in urban mining for over a century, a concept that's central to advancing the circular economy. How has this approach evolved over the years, and what role does your terminal play in building a circular ecosystem?
So yes, over a century ago, our family business began as a simple scrapyard with cranes and manual handling, recovering valuable metals from discarded items. And fast forward to today, the concept of urban mining, you can always call it also recycling, has transformed itself entirely, especially because the products that we handle now are far more complex. Think of the composition of a car in 1990 versus today. So we actually evolved with the complexity of the discarded products. I would say at our terminals, we bridge actually the gap between waste generators and manufacturers, being a time traveler between being produced and end of life and manufacturing again. So thinking of a car in 2002 being 75% recyclable versus today's 97%. The availability of high quality secondary raw materials, what seems very easy for steel, allows for reshoring of sustainable industrial activity, something that we really will need in Europe, and is also important for prosperity in our region. And it's actually that way of thinking, of closing the gap. For steel, it is very easy for the product that you have that gap that you can close, that you have that loop that can inspire a circular ecosystem. Because I believe that what is a circular ecosystem and what is circular economy? For me, I like to compare it with nature. It is just like a forest with different trees. That forest thrives when roots connect. We have to foster collaboration across stakeholders to build a thriving circular ecosystem. And there is something also very important, that way of thinking that is for us so normal, how we can adapt it in the rest of our industry.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for sharing such a compelling journey of impact in urban mining. So it's inspiring to see how scrap terminals like yours are advancing in the circular ecosystems. Now, Elvira, let's bring your expertise into the conversation. Ports often face the challenge of balancing sustainability with traditional priorities like cargo throughput and efficient land use. From your research and experience, why should ports prioritize circular economy principles, and how can they navigate this balance effectively?
Thank you for the question. I believe that ports should prioritize CE principles. First of all, from a high level perspective, being that they have a societal role to play. Especially from the port managing body perspective or the port authority's perspective, and if this port authority also has a hybrid or a public-private governance structure, I believe the societal value they play is even more important. Secondly, they have to fully deploy their first mover advantages. Let me clarify. As Caroline already said, a lot of ports already had, long before circular economy was a term, they already had circular economy activities. Recycling has been an activity in especially city ports for many decades already. So that's not something new. What is interesting is that they have a lot of experience with that, and that gives them a first mover advantage in a lot of CE activities. A third element why ports should prioritize these principles is because they have a license to operate for these specific activities. And they have space for that, or they can make space for these activities. That's an important advantage, especially in densely populated areas where it's difficult to find spaces for some noisy, not always very attractive circular economy activities. And then fourth, I think that ports should engage in CE because it's going to be their new normal. They have to link with the new flows because the secondary material flows will become their core traffic flows in the future. Okay, we have a transit period, but it's starting now, this new normal. So they will, as such, become a source themselves of these secondary materials and of their own flows, and assure their position in these flows and in these routes. And that's why I believe proactively ports should engage in it to assure their new business normal and welfare and growth of the ports for the future. If it comes to the balance, well, there is two things. The business model of ports is generally based on port dues and on concessions, port dues being linked with cargo flows and concession with space rental or land use. And I think a lot of ports engaging actively in the circular economy today are already working hard to find a new balance between these port dues and concession fees. We see that much more is going into the direction of I would say a heavier weight on the concession fees rather than on the port dues, because we know that many CE activities until today, they do not generate the necessary flows to assure these port dues, at least not in the short run. But this new balance also requires a kind of level playing fields with competing ports. And I see that some ports are hesitating. If you cannot ask anything for your terminal sites, for your concessions, just because the port dues are under pressure. And there should be a level playing field in regions and ranges with competing ports, maybe some collaboration on that level. And then a second way to balance it is an efficient spatial planning of port managers. And that goes beyond the port cluster or port area itself. So inside and along corridors of ports, look for ideal spaces where you can place pilots in CE and then move on as they create scale, move them on shorter or closer to the water side as soon as they have some activity with flows or some prospects in that sense.
Thank you very much, Elvira, for these very detailed insights. I saw James nodding quite often. So is there anything you would like to add? And also Piotr, we come to you in a minute. So James first, is there anything?
Yeah, I would just say that it's music to my ears listening to Elvira. These are the things that we're experiencing in Amsterdam. All these different challenges. I've been writing along the balance between port dues and concessions. That's quite a tricky one, because obviously the ports want to move through this transition without there being a big dip in either tonnages or port dues. So we want to, you need to play with the price of your land and your port dues. But that is, as Elvira quite rightly said, it's very difficult at the moment because circular economy activities, certainly the newer ones, they don't have the scale that the traditional linear economy has when it comes to moving cargo flows around. So I just like to say I agree completely with what Elvira was just explaining.
Perfect. Thank you very much, James. And talking about concessions and ports, that leads us directly to Piotr. So let's turn to the perspective of a global terminal operator. DP World manages over 60 terminals worldwide, placing you in a unique position to drive systemic change. So what initially motivated your organization to explore circular economy principles, and what are key initiatives you have taken in this field?
Sure, I was also vigorously nodding when Professor Elvira was speaking, because I couldn't agree more that circular economy is inherently embedded in a good, sound sustainability strategy. So, when we talk about the sustainability strategy and what it's based on, of course, first of all, it's a good cause, and at DP World we care and we want to play our part in protecting the planet and protecting future generations. But I also strongly believe that a good sustainability strategy must be practical and has to take into consideration the business drivers. And there are plenty of business drivers, for example, customer demand and customers, requiring companies such as DP World to display sustainable practices and also embed, sustainability and circular economy practices in the way we provide services to customers. It is also an expectation from investors that a company or their investments follow sound sustainability and circular economy practices. There's also quite a bit of regulation coming in, maybe not strictly around circular economy, but you see a lot of regulation around decarbonization, around waste, around recycling, and all of that really comes back again to circularity and circular economy. For us, the sustainability, decarbonization, and circular economy strategies are also about avoiding risks. If we drive our projects with these principles in mind, whether it's the physical risks or the transition risks or regulatory risks in the future, that helps us avoid them today and give us the comfort that these risks will not be impacting the business in the future. So I do have a few very, very interesting examples to give, and I'm hoping, Christina, you're going to ask about them. But for now, let me leave it at that, right? That, sustainability is not just about kind of the evangelism of protecting the planet, but more importantly, it has a lot of business drivers. And that's also absolutely one of the key reasons why companies like DP World engage in projects and initiatives around sustainability and circular economy.
Thanks a lot, Piotr. Yeah, we come to further aspects of that a bit later. So it's very interesting to hear the perspective of a global terminal operator to embrace circular economy principles. Elvira, building on that, let's consider the diversity among ports. Each port has its own unique characteristics. So from your research, what are typical first steps that ports should prioritize to begin implementing circular economy principles effectively?
Thank you for that question. Actually, I have researched a few years ago how some very diverse port typologies have addressed the CE challenge, let's say. And we saw that some ports started the CE transition with looking for industrial symbiosis, but that requires industry in your port, of course. Some other had long-standing, like Caroline said, long-standing recycle activities and started off in this flow of transition from a recycle hub. But that were usually ports very close to a larger city or a metropolitan area at least. And then there were some ports left behind. We call them gateway ports, logistic ports, coastal ports, not really having a major industry, neither in the port area nor in the adjacent city or region, and they were not located to a major city. An example in Belgium is the port of Ostende, and we can name many examples around the world if they're not close to a large city or housing an industrial cluster, for example. So we focused on these more difficult ports and how they could, even from that position, develop CE activities, and how they should, these peripheral ports. And it's also the third step for many major port hubs like the Port of Hamburg, the Port of Rotterdam, Port of Antwerp, Bruges, etc., who have developed themselves from industrial symbiosis to a recycle hub, and then into the third level. And the third level is namely the level that also applies to gateway ports. And there we have studied the different steps they should take or they can interestingly make to make CE activities happen in their port as well. And first of all there was a need to determine the preconditions of the supply side. What are the endowments of the port? What is the geography, the infrastructure, the policies, and what is the port strategy and vision? Is there any CE activity that should allow the port to reach its objectives, for example? And it already starts there, and this will set like a context and framework for the possibilities of CE. A second step was then defining the location factors, the requirements for CE. We benchmark ports in our analysis, and for example, recycling activities on average take 4 or 5 hectares in the ports that we considered on average. It's an average. There is a deviation possible, of course. But new value streams, these new value streams that you're looking for as any port and as a gateway port in particular, because you can't function as a recycle hub or create industrial symbiosis, you'll have to focus on these new value streams. Well, these new value streams, they do not take so much space in your ports. So the spatial impact of some CE activities is maybe minor, especially in a first stage. So that's also interesting. Define these factors. Where do we have spaces? How much space do we have for this? What is the impact on our business model if we attract an activity here, etc. And then 3 is then obviously linking these available sites to the port area conditions that I explained in the first step. 4th is trying to define the prospects of this CE activity. What is the timing? Will it develop into a sustainable business activity within 5-10 years? What is the time frame of scaling up the activity? What kind of flows can we expect at what point in time? And then 5th, and of course quite crucial at that stage, is finding coalitions of the willing. Who is also from the private sector, of course, willing to invest in this, together with the Port Authority. So the first steps that I explained are more I would say, proactive way to address, as a gateway port, a CE strategy, and only in a stage of setting these context variables, linking available spaces to it, then you go and look for coalitions of the willing. And I remember some talks I had with port managing bodies and with CEOs, and they said, well, but our own clients, our current clients, are a little bit afraid of that. So my first answer to that was, consider them first for your coalitions of the willing. Go and talk to them. What role can they play? As port users, as major stakeholders, as current clients, what role are they willing to play in this CE transition? And try to make them part of some of these coalitions of the willing in the first place, before you're looking outside of your port area. Finally, I should say, for some ports, it's the transition is almost given to them on a plate, because bottom up, the companies, like industrial companies, are looking for symbiosis themselves. Or the city has a problem with waste, and recycling activities have been business reality and business profitable for many decades. But then what about all these other ports not having these, I would say, bottom-up company involvement in CE? What can they do to address CE and to make CE possible in their ports? And I think then the case of the gateway ports, with the different steps I explained, gives a certain possible development plan to those ports as well.
And what Elvira mentioned just now, James, I would like to ask you, how did the Port of Amsterdam approach this in practice? So when it comes to infrastructure, port could play a critical role in enabling circular practices. Which challenges did you encounter in developing the facilities or systems needed to support reuse, recycling, and other circular economy principles? And how did you prioritize these efforts?
Yeah, that's a good question, and again, I was nodding along as Elvira was speaking, because a lot of what she was saying was very recognizable. If I look back at the sort of last 8 or 9 years that we've spent working in circular economy and developing this industrial ecosystem, as we call it, in the Port of Amsterdam, we've encountered all these different challenges along the way. I think what's important to say about the Port of Amsterdam is we're a port authority, we're a landlord port, and so we actually have sort of 3 core responsibilities, and the first and foremost actually is the market manager. So we, as a port authority, we determine which activities come into the port and where they locate physically in the port. So that gives us a lot of control when it comes to creating these industrial symbioses. So we try and put companies close to each other who are going to work together, who are going to exchange either energetic or material waste flows. So that's a very important role that we have. But we're also a matchmaker and a co-creator. So when you combine those 3 important roles, it means that as a port authority, we can be really active in creating this circular economy cluster in the port area. And on paper, and now that I'm saying it, I realize it sounds very simple. So we say, okay, this is where you're going to be located, this is who you're going to be working with, and this is going to be our input as a port authority. It sounds very simple, but the reality is extremely complex. It's very, very, very difficult to realize this goal of an industrial circular economy ecosystem in the port, and that has to do with lots of different factors, both internal and external. I think to mention the internal first, in our case, Port of Amsterdam, we're very full. We don't have much physical space. The port area is sort of reaching its limits, and it's even being put under pressure by the encroaching city. So people want to live in the city of Amsterdam, of course, and that's putting physical pressure on the port. So that makes it difficult to start with. But then you have all different kinds of challenges with regards to financing, permitting, finding feedstocks, acceptance by the market, the fact that there is no level playing field at this moment for quite a few circular economy activities. For example, plastic recycling. It's very, very difficult for a plastic recycler to compete with the low cost of virgin plastics. So what we've seen in these last sort of 8 or 9 years is that it's a constant game of falling down and standing up, and then getting knocked back, and then you make some steps forwards, and then you're stepping backwards again. It's very, on one hand, it's very interesting, and it's understandable because we're in a period of transition. So when you talk about transition, you know that this is not something which is going to be easy and straightforward and quick. But it's sometimes very frustrating because you take into account all the aspects that Elvira was mentioning. So you're trying to do your spatial planning and take on your role as co-creator and matchmaker. And then you put all this time and effort into it, and then sometimes it just doesn't work, or it works and then the company or the activity goes bust. And so you're back to square one. So that's what makes my job really, really interesting, is that you're constantly busy with all these new innovative technologies, combining them with existing logistics, trying to form these coalitions of the willing, and then trying to make some headway in this transition from linear to circular. So I think the role of port authorities is it's a big role, it's an important role, and I agree with Elvira when she says that the Port Authority should be taking this very seriously and realizing that this is going to be the license to operate moving forward. But again, it's not easy.
Thank you, James. And this time I saw Piotr nodding heavily. And as you have put out some teaser, we have here questions from the audience actually for you. So can you please provide some specific examples of business models in ports related to circular economy? What services do customers need for that?
Absolutely. Let me start by a few examples. I don't know if they're 100% related to customers, but I think will serve as good instances of how circular economy can be embedded in practice in port operations. So it all starts with a problem, and then trying to figure out if you can solve this problem by embedding circular economy principles in the solution. So one of the, call it problems, is that around 30% of all Scope 1 carbon emissions in DP World's operations in ports come from operating diesel terminal tractors. These are the trucks that never leave the terminal, but also consume quite significant amounts of diesel, and of course that results in significant carbon emissions. So as part of our strategy, we're trying to electrify as many of these terminal trucks as possible. Of course, the primary solution would be to wait until the end of life of a diesel terminal tractor and replace it with an electric terminal tractor. However, what our engineering team in Jebel Ali has done is they actually came up with an idea to take the old end-of-life terminal tractors, strip them of the diesel engines and all the components related to the internal combustion engine, purchase electric motors and batteries, and actually with their own capabilities, they started retrofitting or refurbishing these trucks with electric components, which effectively, instead of sending these trucks to scrap yards or selling them off, gives them another at least 10 years of useful life. And also sustainable life, right? Run on electricity coming from renewable energy. So I think that was a fantastic achievement by them, and we're going to be seeing more and more of these retrofitted pieces of equipment in our operations. Another example, and another problem. One of the portfolio companies of DP World is called Dry Docks World. It provides typical dry docks services to marine and offshore companies. We've identified that around 50% of all of the waste that DP World generates globally comes actually from these operations, from the process of sandblasting, which is a process you use to clean the hulls of the vessels. And in fact, all of that grit or all the sand that is produced as a result of this process is then collected and moved to a nearby cement factory. So again, huge amounts of waste that are being recycled into useful products. And then the last one, back to Professor Elvira's points, like these do require local capabilities as well as local industries to use the waste and use these materials that ports generate. But another example, that puts a smile on my face almost, is our partnership with a non-profit organization called Bridges for Prosperity, to whom to date we've donated over 18 kilometers of used cables from port operations or port equipment. And Bridges for Prosperity use these cables to build bridges. So in this instant, the cables from DP World were used to build 17 bridges across 9 districts in rural Rwanda, which gives daily walkways to a community of around 50,000 people. So there are ways of thinking outside of the box as well, and how you can use the waste for the greater good.
Thank you very much, Piotr. Caroline, would you like to continue, and let's have a look on which innovations have had the greatest impact on your operations and how you are leveraging them to maximize reuse potential and minimize waste?
Yes, well, of course, what we hear already, the speakers before me, they just, for me, a CE activity is mostly linked with innovation. And that is, for me, sometimes what makes it difficult. I think we have to open it a bit. And as James said, we today, a CE activity, we make a hub in ports, and then we bring those activities that are mostly more in innovation than in daily economical use or economics. And there maybe we narrow ourselves. For that, it's possible to see more to it as a problem, and then not as only innovation, because then you have what is so important is to have innovation and market reality together. That's what for me, we have, of course, a lot of innovations in our company, but they are so sector specific. That's what you see in those hubs in the ports. And so for my company, innovation and market reality have always been our compass. And I think that is what is very important, that economy and ecology have to go hand in hand. And it has to be that new way of thinking. And we often say, well, circular economy, we need recycling. It's actually what teaches what exists of recycling, what teaches it, that we have to make ourselves common. It's true that technology, it improves our efficiency, but for us, it really has redefined how deeply we integrate circularity into our workflows, creating materials ready for reuse. Of course, AI-driven sorting systems, adopting them will enable us to process even more complex materials and further improve the efficiency, the quality of new secondary raw materials. And that's important, that we have to embed that as well in our way of thinking, in our way of having the economy, the industry. It's a bit like James said, the industrial ecosystem. And so the potential of secondary raw materials is also essential for meeting up the obligation for producers to integrate recycled content into their products in view of our scarcity of primary raw materials. And yes, that is also very essential. I think the fact that today legislation is going to enforce recycled content, that will help us to create more and more a circular economy, because we often focus too much on waste or scarcity, and we don't really see it like a resource, a natural resource that we actually already have. And that way of thinking that is so normal in my industry is one of the reasons why I wanted to be here and to inspire the others.
Thank you so much, Caroline. This is really inspiring what you've just told us. Innovation is central in any case. Quickly, Piotr, let's shift to the challenges of implementing circular economy principles on a global scale. With DP World's vast network of terminals, what are main obstacles you have faced in transitioning to these practices, and how do these challenges vary across different regions?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think the types of initiatives you can implement really vary terminal by terminal and regions by region. Exactly what we've heard from previous speakers, whether there is capability within the port, whether the concession and the ecosystem allows for it, whether there are waste recycling facilities, whether there is industry. in the region. I think, in developed economies that might be a little bit easier than in developing countries where, these ecosystems do not exist. So that is challenge number one. I think challenge number two is simply awareness amongst, the people who run the operations. For example, the example I gave, right? Is sometimes the default solution, like just buying new piece of equipment, may be the right thing for the operations, but from the circular economy perspective, you just need to get creative. But in order to get creative, you need to be aware about the solutions that are available to you. And then thirdly, and that probably again speaks to broader challenges with sustainability and decarbonization. Oftentimes it's related to cost or a change in the operations, and sometimes change in the operations, especially in the hard to abate sector, or sometimes, as I like to call it, expensive to abate sector, is not that easy.
Okay, Piotr. Just a very quick question from the audience. You mentioned previously retrofitting of equipment. What's your opinion on already involving equipment manufacturers right from the start? Do you think it makes sense to force them to involve circular economy principles at that point in time? If you could very quickly give your opinion to that.
Oh yeah, 100%. One thing that's crucial to, for example, a scope 3 or a supply chain emissions strategy is sustainable procurement, and a strong sustainable procurement policy should definitely involve working with the suppliers of your goods, but also and services to promote circular economy.
Thanks very much. Now, Elvira, let's broaden the scope again a bit. Beyond waste management, circular economy principles have the potential to drive innovation in other areas as well. From your perspective, how can concepts like product design, logistics, or network management contribute to circularity in ports? And actually, we have also a question from the audience that goes in that direction. So the activities in ports focus currently more on recycling, but what else, like circular design, should be considered by ports to focus with perspective on the business case justification? So if you could just be very brief in your answer. I know it's difficult, but appreciate if you could summarize this.
Well, I looked at innovation from the port authorities or PMBs, port managing bodies perspective, and we saw quite some potential for innovation on their behalf. First of all, and that's maybe even going beyond the activity and role of PMBs or port authorities, it's we have to innovate in optimizing logistics, because one of the major challenges of making CE business viable is the import logistics. And regulation plays a role. So innovation in regulation here would also be important. Besides the business model innovation, which I described already earlier, the cluster managing bodies or the port managing bodies should optimize their role as network managers. They finding and supporting the coalitions of the willing. And we have, in a large survey, found that access to funding, writing projects and supporting projects in the pilot phase would really mean a difference in the innovation that port authorities can trigger. Any other innovation potential lies in energy transition options and developing these, like heat, water, waste, recovery. We also found that in procurement innovation, not just procurement like Piotr said for procurement of companies, but also procurement of PMBs, port managing bodies. I think CE in their own tendering procedures would already make a big difference. Use, for example, secondary materials when you do works in your port or infrastructure works in your port. And then last but not least, we need innovation in data management. A lot of what the CE transition does or is done already is not captured because we have no good data or data is not managed. We are with our team working very hard on developing a circular port monitor with feasible yet ambitious monitoring for ports to see how they really live up to their proposed CE strategy. I think the innovation of ports in terms of CE can benefit from these options already to a large extent.
Thank you very much, Elvira, for your insights. And again, I saw James nodding. That leads you to our next question to you. So given the complexity of this approach, how are you assessing the environmental and economic impact of circular economy initiatives in the Port of Amsterdam, and which KPIs have been most effective in capturing this multifaceted progress?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think Elvira said it again, that it's something that's quite difficult to monitor. You try and monitor it for yourself as a port authority, and just to give an example of how simple we were doing the monitoring in the beginning, we just said, okay, our only KPI is that we allocate 25 hectares to use for circular economy activities. And of course, at that moment, I'm talking about 8-9 years ago, you think, okay, this is a good way to measure what we're doing and how big the impact is going to be in the port, purely looking at the uses of physical space. And of course, what we saw is that those 25 hectares were filled quite quickly. But then you slowly start to realize, well, it's about so much more than just filling space. We need to be thinking about added value. We need to be thinking about CO2 reduction. We need to be thinking about the reduction in waste, the reduction of kilometers moving waste around the country and the region and the world. So slowly we're developing our own set of KPIs, looking at those factors. But I have to say that it's not easy. Because I mean, your first stumbling block is obviously what is circular economy, and what do you see as a port authority as circular economy? Is it something which is truly circular? Are you going to be very purist about it and say we'll only count circular economy if it really is 100% circular? And if you do that, then of course not very many things are fully circular at this moment. So where do you draw the line? What is the scope? Those kind of things are very tricky. So we invited a PhD student to look at this and create a set of KPIs for us, and those are what we would like to implement in the coming years. But I have to say, I would be very I think it's very encouraging if I hear that there's going to be a monitor across ports in the Euro Delta, because I think that's needed. If everybody is just thinking of their own way of monitoring, then you don't really have any reliable benchmark. And I think what also needs to be taken into account, and that goes back to the question which was asked by somebody in the audience, is what is going to be the role of ports moving forward in circular economy? We need to talk about much more than just waste. we need to talk about the role of ports in the logistics of pumping goods around in a truly circular economy. When goods are designed to be circular, they need to be returned, refurbished, redistributed. And I think that's something which is going to be a really interesting challenge and a really big call for innovation on the logistics side of port activities. So this is something, I can't roll off a list of KPIs that we now have, but it's something which we are developing and that we're working on at this moment.
Thank you very much, James. Very interesting, and we are looking forward to it. So we've talked about innovation, infrastructure, touched a bit on standards. Let's focus now a bit on people. So their efforts are imperative for the success of circular economy implementation. So building a circular mindset within an organization and across partnerships is a challenge that requires engagement, collaboration, and the right skills. So Piotr, how do you engage employees and supply chain partners in circular economy initiatives, and what skills do you see as critical for fostering this mindset across your operations?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and as I alluded to before, I strongly believe that it all starts with awareness. So when it comes to our broader sustainability strategy, we have plenty of ways how we communicate with employees, whether it's videos on YouTube, simple videos on Instagram or other social media, just to get people excited about these initiatives, all the way down to more kind of technical deep dives with the regional teams, again through all sorts of different channels. One thing that we've found, we have recently done a pilot of a culture study. So what is our culture in the organization? What are the good behaviors? What are the behaviors we need to work on? And one thing that was unequivocal is that throughout all of these responses and all the regions we have actually surveyed, employees said that one thing that kind of they agree on, that it's working extremely well in the company, are the sustainability initiatives. People like being engaged, people like to know, and people also like to be aware of how is it that they can contribute towards the sustainability initiative. So that was a big kind of boost in the morale of the team, that what we're doing is being appreciated internally, and genuinely people want to engage in this. Sometimes they just need a little bit of a guidance of how exactly they can do it, and that could be also some departments. I've mentioned the example of the engineering, but again, it's procurement, it's finance, it's the sustainability teams. Like, it really touches every or working with customers, the commercial teams, right? It really touches every part of the organization. In terms of what skills are required, there is an element of technical skills, being aware of what is possible and what can really be done. There is an art in speaking to customers about it. There's definitely an art in trying to figure things out with the suppliers, whether it's through policies or just proofs of concepts and projects that are being built with them, and then also exploring all the external opportunities, with companies like Bridges for Prosperity. But there's a lot of other international partnerships that can help you as an organization embed the circular economy principles in your operations.
Thank you very much, Piotr, for emphasizing the importance of engaging with and of people. Caroline, let's build on this idea and take it to a wider level. From your perspective, what strategies or partnerships are essential to scale the impact of scrap terminals and establish circular principles as a standard across port ecosystems worldwide?
Well, yes, one thing, I hear lots of scrap terminals and so on. Of course, that's my daily business, but we will not get a circular port if we have a port full of scrap terminals. Let's say that. I have to say why do we have in Europe a lot of scrap terminals is because in Europe we are a welfare countries, and that makes that we have a lot of products. We live in very dense cities, as also Elvira mentioned. Living together makes that you don't want waste next to you, and that you try to for a problem, find a solution. So that is scaling circularity requires partnerships that mirror nature's independence, showing us natural ecosystems. It's actually like biomimicry, for those who know. And I think we have to use it a little bit like a mirror. For me, the strategy we want to champion relates to energy and materials management. Often, for instance, in the port of Antwerp, we have the infrastructure for the production of energy. And it is still the vision on that infrastructure. We have the production of energy, and the investment has been built the last years on having the infrastructure and the renewable production, but not yet on sharing it, not yet on using it together. We are saying it now today. We are saying, okay, we have to start to share it, and you have a few innovative examples, but how does it become common? How is that the new normal? Often I feel a lot of, do we only use renewables? What with the grid capacity? Those who have higher grid capacity, can they jointly reunite with my neighbor who has more renewables? And sometimes it's only with the neighbor, because you have a lot of contact with your neighbor, but not with the facility that is a couple of keys further on. So I think there it's very important on energy. On the other hand, on materials, like James said, we have to see as a port that we have the flows again when it has to be reused or when it has to be refurbished and so on. To my honestly opinion, those flows will always exist. That's economy. That's why I was saying ecology and economy has to go hand in hand. Those materials, if they have to go back, and if you have a certain flow on it, it will be there. And as a port community, you will have for sure a flourishing and durable ecosystem. It goes without saying that we also advocates for harmonized policies. Even within Europe, it's not always easy, because we're evolving to more and more European regulation, but we still have a lot of directives that have been placed into each member state that has its own policy. And we'll see, it will be very important, tax carbon benefits. But it's an essential condition for the development of these ecosystems. And then again, there is, in my mind, I'm like, we have to be careful for over-regulation, because like we said, okay, KPIs, we need it, but we have to be careful that when it's going to be too much over-regulated or too much innovation, CE, thinking, that maybe we don't have the economics anymore, and that they will not be able to pay the port to, like we have today with the usage and the concessions. So yes, an example there is what we just heard, the diesel terminal trucks. For instance, on wheel loaders, for us, we can easily go to, you would think, well, there are electrical wheel loaders. In my company, I cannot use them because they don't have enough power to treat my materials. Just to say that sometimes what is on one terminal more than obvious is not at all on another. So how do you put the KPIs on that example? And well, I think for sure by exporting best practices and from AI-driven recovery to stakeholder collaboration, we envision a global network of circular hubs, and we will be able to connect regions, and we will be amplifying impact.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for this interesting insights. So we are already a bit over time, so let's wrap up the discussion for today. And I really like to hear a very quick answer from each of you. So if you had to recommend one bold step for the port industry to accelerate the adoption of circular economy principles, what would that be? So just one bullet point, please. Let's start with Caroline.
Give ourselves time. Give time. What today the global world is so obvious is a normal thinking for us. A circular economy, we have already the word, but we don't have the thinking. And it will need time, and it will give new views. So give ourselves the time. And I believe that as today, global thinking is normal, circular thinking will be normal as well.
Thank you. Piotr, would you like to continue?
Sure. I think it's to stay curious and creative. I think that there is so many things and so many initiatives that, you know, are being done in the sustainability field, where sometimes maybe just a little tweak or, you know, a little bit of that creative genius could push all of these initiatives to truly become the drivers of circular economy.
Thanks a lot. And James, what's your view?
Yeah, I agree completely with the first two statements, and I would like to add that we should all be pushing for a level playing field. I think it's very, very important to see that at this moment there isn't a level playing field for circular economy. There is a bias towards the linear economy. There are too many subsidies for linear products and services, and the circular economy is not able to compete because of the world we've created with the linear economy. So we all need to fight to make it a level playing field.
Thank you. And finally, Elvira, your one recommendation?
As an academic, it's always difficult to stay short and to keep it to one. On a personal level, I would say think CE and set the tone on a managerial level. On a company level, that's my one bold for the companies, is to partner or find partners with the unusual suspects, not the usual ones. Look out for unusual suspects. For the port authorities, I would say invest in circular business development and going proactively to look for these coalitions. And on a government perspective, I would agree with James. We have to legally redefine waste, make international waste transport possible, etc., and bring CE at an equal level playing field than any other business and material flows.
Thank you so much, Elvira, and thanks to all of you for these inspiring recommendations. I saw nodding all over the way, so I think we are all in agreement on this. So it's clear that accelerating the adoption of circular economy principles requires both strategic vision and practical action. So a big thank you to our speakers, Caroline, Elvira, Piotr and James, for sharing your insights and expertise today. And of course, thank you to our audience for your engagement, contributions, questions, and staying with us all the time. And we hope that today's discussion sparked ideas and inspired action within your organization. So stay tuned for updates on our next episode of Connecting Ports. Until then, let's keep debating what matters and driving change in our industry. As usual, the session has been recorded and will be made available shortly on HPC YouTube channel. And a big thanks also to the production team behind the scenes and especially to Port of Hamburg Marketing. As we wrap up the year, we wish you all a peaceful and joyful holiday season and a successful start to 2025. We look forward to seeing you again in spring for the next session of Connecting Ports. So until then, take care, goodbye and tschüss from Hamburg.